In the words of every sane horror movie character that had an IQ above double digits, don't do it. So it's been 12 years since the shockingly mediocre Ring 2. Believe it or not, that film was actually directed by the mastermind behind Ringu. So now we got another horror sequel that nobody really asked for out in theaters. Look, I'm gonna level with you and admit that it's pretty difficult for horror films to impress me these days, much less PG-13 ones. For the most part, they're just tired, predictable, and have completely uninteresting, disposable characters. But a true recipe for disaster is an unpleasant amalgamation of the aforementioned complaints, topped with the cardinal sin of any movie of any kind: boredom. And yes, quite unfortunately, Rings is a disaster piece. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Ring premise, it's based off of this haunted videotape with pretty unsettling images. After watching it, you've only got 7 days to live. And once your time is up, the evil spirit of the abused girl which generated this tape comes out to prematurely terminate your hourglass of time. You can spare yourself such a fate if you just make a copy of the tape and pass it on to some other sucker, because then the curse will be their problem, not yours. And it won't be their problem anymore if they just repeat the cycle and pass the video on to someone else. So the film starts off with another one of these good-looking men you find in almost every other horror film out there. Unfortunately for this unlucky guy, he's seen the tape. So 7 days in and a few minutes away from the time he actually saw the video, he finds himself on a plane. But he learns a little too late that he had to make a copy of the video to pass down to someone else, so the plane crashes and the guy is a goner. So 2 years later, a university professor played by Leonard of the Big Bang Theory buys the VCR that belonged to the guy who died on the plane. And of course, he watches the VCR lodged inside of it. Cut to our two leads. We've got Holt, played by Alex Rowe, and Julia, played by the very cute Matilda Lutz. The two are lovebirds and they're separated when Holt goes away to college. But when Holt suspiciously stops answering her calls and messages, Julia makes the drive to his university to investigate further. And that leads her to the lab of this professor where he's doing a whole bunch of research on this tape and the story behind it. Turns out that Holt was one out of other guinea pigs that the professor was using for his experiment. So when Julia finds out what this tape does to people, she and Holt try to figure out a way to get rid of this curse once and for all. I had a major issue with the pacing of this film. Though the film clocks in at under 2 hours, it actually felt more like 3. I don't mind slow burners as long as they develop some characters and build up tension, but there doesn't seem to be any of that in here. The overall plot is unnecessarily convoluted and ridden with exposition. For me, it looked like a feeble attempt to generate some kind of backstory around Samara Morgan's past. It was just uninteresting, boring, and highly predictable. The scares are too little and unevenly placed throughout the film, so they don't come off as effective at all. There's nothing engrossing going on, as for a good deal of the film, we watch Julia and Holt figure out stuff we already know from the previous 2 installments. If that isn't considered a waste of time, I don't know what is. There's a very interesting point that professional critics are making about this film, which I happen to agree with. It had a pretty golden opportunity to do something new with the franchise and transport the premise into the modern age of technology, but that it was sadly squandered. So many possibilities gone to waste. Nobody uses VHS anymore. Now we've got internet, we've got YouTube, we've got Facebook, we got all sorts of stuff. Instead of grabbing that opportunity by the balls, all we ever see is just file copying. Looks to me like the film was more interested in rehashing old shit. What a shame. No creativity at all. As for the performances, the cast did alright with what was given to them. The two leads were rather good, but thanks to a clumsily written script, they're reduced to mere plot devices. The chemistry wasn't fully palpable, so I didn't really feel that emotional connection too much, but at least the two actors tried. The standout performance is from Vince D'Onofrio, who played the blind priest. I actually thought he was one of the film's highlights near the end of the 3rd act, but it was too little and too late. So with sluggish pacing, uninteresting characters, a boring, predictable plot, and a complete failure to do anything new with the franchise, makes this film unworthy of my recommendation. And of course, they end the film on a cliffhanger so another sequel could be made. Why? Money, of course. Doesn't look like anybody gives a shit to provide us good quality horror anymore. So I'm gonna give Rings a 3. So these are my thoughts on Rings. What did you think of the film? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, if you'll excuse me, the real Big Fish concert is tonight. And if you like what I do, give me a like, hit that big subscribe button, stay tuned, and I will see you on the next one.